they aren't really focused on the greater good. Whether or not they realize it, they're just focused on obtaining some kind of role for themselves in society, and their brain doesn't really go there. Their brain doesn't really go to like, what is this actually doing in the world?
I thought an interesting place to start would be something that you posted about recently on Instagram on your music account, Oloff, and you reacted to this thing that happened where climate protesters threw a can of soup on Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers painting to protest fossil fuels. So I'm not sure what was going through the minds of these climate change protesters that connected that to fossil fuels, but you wrote that Van Gogh expressed himself by creating things that people love, and these people express themselves by destroying things that people love. So I wanted to ask you, where do you think that this type of destructive expression comes from?
I think to some extent it's just something people are capable of. It's something that's in people. But I think a lot of it comes from universities as well. Seems clear that a lot of people come out of university kind of somewhat indoctrinated. It depends what type of degree you study, obviously, but there does seem to be a lot of ideological indoctrination that goes on there. I think some of the professors are people who were either peripheral figures or active parts of kind of the Cultural Revolution or Civil Rights Movement, or maybe they were a little bit after that and wanted to be more a part of it than they were, and they kind of project that onto today and onto their students. There's been a kind of one-upping, I think, as well, from both sides of the sort of social kind of political spectrum, because I don't think it's really political anymore, is it? It's like it's a whole sort of divide between people. And I think also it's it's just people lashing out, really. It's people kind of exercising some form of power, and it's quite a cheap, easily available form of power, right? To go and like do something destructive like that. It's kind of it makes people feel like they're something, or they're doing something, or they have some kind of impact on the world. And I think sometimes it's a way of lashing out about their own personal lives, their personal failings, or negative emotions that they have.
Yeah, it seems like the lashing out, and especially the one-upping, is part of it. Because I watched the video after I saw your post, and just the way that they got ready for it, like they're pumping themselves up. It's like you could tell that there are other things that were involved in their psyche at that moment besides climate change. Like they were almost competing with the last climate change protest instead of trying to do something that would draw attention to climate change and actually change people's behaviors, which is, it's counterintuitive to the whole notion of why someone would want to protest in the first place. Because if you get someone's attention, that can be a form of protest, but it won't necessarily lead to a change in people's behaviors that see it. So you'd want to get people's attention in a way that's going to sort of cultivate this sense of, oh, what I'm doing is fucked up, or what I'm doing is, maybe there's another way of thinking or another way of behavior that these people seem so impassioned about and are pointing out wrongs in society, like in the civil rights movement that was much needed. And when you see something like two college students that really haven't, I don't want to speak for them, but I know certainly at my age, when I was 19, 20 years old, I'm 28 now, so I'm still dumb in a lot of ways, but especially at that age, I was so fucking clueless. And when you see people like that just like dump a can of soup on one of the greatest, most looked up to works of art ever created. And then they kind of just like sit back and they're like, yeah, you're like, in my mind, I'm just like, what the fuck is happening? Like, how do they think this is actually going to change something other than pissing people off and being even more emboldened against climate change? Because they're just going to be like, fuck these people. Like I was going to start recycling, and now I'm going to just order single packages on Amazon just because I want to spite these bitches who toss soup cans on Van Gogh's paintings.
Yeah, it does have that effect. And you see it with Greta Thunberg as well. Like, adults don't like being told what to do by children, and that really puts people's backs up. And also, yeah, what you said, I mean, about how it's not effective. Like, you see the same thing, I guess, in a lot of the culture war stuff going on, a lot of the stuff surrounding racism or just race in general. Most of the time you think, okay, if these people were level-headed and they were really trying to make society less racist and more comfortable for people of every race to kind of interact with each other, this isn't what they would do. Like, this isn't how they would engage. They wouldn't keep creating these kind of negative, circular, kind of unpleasant conversations filled with vitriol. Like, and then you start to think probably they aren't really focused on the greater good. Whether or not they realize it, they're just focused on obtaining some kind of role for themselves in society, and their brain doesn't really go there. Their brain doesn't really go to like, what is this actually doing in the world? As long as they can create some kind of sentence or statement that justifies it, and it gives them some kind of role, then they're kind of happy to do it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a really questioning person, I guess you think you're forced to reckon with that, right? Like you've been into psychedelics and stuff, right? And like, there's times where it really makes you think, like, what am I actually doing? Like, what effect am I having? And like, how am I affecting the world? Some people, I think, are just not there, and they could be, but they're not. And so
I've never actually done a full dose of psychedelics. Some people consider MDMA a psychedelic. So if you do consider it that, then I have, but I've only actually microdosed mushrooms. And other than that, I haven't tried psychedelics, but I have spoken to many people who have, which probably gives me, a 0.1% glance into what it's actually like, but I've never actually tried it myself in a full capacity.
Right. Well, yeah, and similarly with MDMA, it can force you to reckon with things, and I mean, but even without substances, I think it's like, I don't know. I think some of those people, they are capable of it, they just aren't doing it. But when you see them, you look at the images of them and you see the videos of them, they don't look, to be honest, like very functional, happy people. You see a lot of sort of physical kind of sadness or depression almost in them. It's just, they kind of just reek of it a bit, and reek of people who are not operating at a very high level chemically as well. And you see that a lot in these people, to be honest, who engage in these kind of provocative behaviors and stuff. They very rarely seem like people who anybody would want to be. Yeah. I think that's part of the problem, is they don't really want to be those people.
Yeah, and in the situation like this Van Gogh thing, there seems to be a good bit of jealousy, not necessarily towards Van Gogh specifically, but it seems like a lot of these activists want to be artists, and their activism is an art in its own way. There's a craft to championing a cause and then getting people to pay attention. There's a whole creativity that goes along with that. So on a deep level, I wouldn't be surprised if the girls who did this, or however they identify, you have no fucking idea these days. Oh wait, one of my alarms is going off in the background. I must not have turned it off. I'm gonna go grab that. Sorry about that. The alarm that I started using, I have to do squats to turn it off, And so I just had to do 20 squats right there, which is why it took so long.
Well, is it an app or?
It's an app called Alarmy. I was using just the normal iPhone alarm before, and I had the alarm play Petite Biscuit, Sunset Lover by Petite Biscuit, and I just started enjoying it too much to the point where I wasn't actually getting up. I was just letting the song play, and the regular alarm wasn't getting me up. I would sleep through that sometimes. So this somehow manipulates the iPhone sound system in ways that I've never heard a sound as annoying as this alarm. And it's so jarring to wake up at, and then it senses the motion. You have to keep your thumbs printed on it, and you can set it to do a task when you get up. So do squats or take a picture of the bathroom mirror, and then it turns off.
Wow. So just from your thumbs, it knows you're doing squats?
Yeah, I've tried to turn it off in bed before, and it's very hard to hold on to it. It's somehow that there's a gyration thing in the iPhone where it can tell if you're going up and down, and somehow the app taps into that.
Wow. That's amazing.
But yeah, that's why it took so long.
No problem.
But yeah, to go back to the Van Gogh thing, I was saying there seems to be a bit of jealousy involved, because I do believe that if a lot of activists had the choice, they would want to be seen as artists instead of activists. And it says a lot that the thing that these girls chose to take down is a painting. And they may not be jealous against Van Gogh specifically, but there's a reason, either consciously or subconsciously, why they chose something public like a painting, and not just a well-known building or some sort of place to do it in public, like desecrate, I don't know, like something else that people don't see as artistically, but they chose a Van Gogh painting and just tossed fucking tomato soup all over it. And there's probably something inside them that feels that this is an art piece of its own, what they just did, like performance art in a way, not just a protest. So maybe there's something there where they just want to be creative, they want to be seen as artists, and they haven't been given the guidance to really express that in a positive way. And it could be the college campus, the culture that you were mentioning at the beginning, just not a lot of positive influence on how to be a creative person and do it in a way that is, going to be fulfilling and induce positive behavioral changes in yourself and other people, if activism is the path that you ultimately want to take, or maybe you just want to be creative. But there does seem to be a deep-rooted jealousy in this whole act that they committed.